Yeshu byatse bahebwine arepuye nekyate duvanye detulia hitukune tuibeta ne privade ne tuisase ne temo vadu klopuche Watenise adu a eberi Wakare putiana mokupu Hebri bene Wate chupre madunenye Chute bene Nova pu abenete Bine eka kirova kenu Nete sa sedu danemu Mirutu machadu olu mole Ku emosu nedu tunete Hebri bene Vate chupre madunenye Chute bene Noa pu abenete Hebri bene Vate chupre madunenye Chute bene Noa pu abenete
So, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. We're not going to look at every verse because as you read through the first chapter, many of these verses are very easy to understand as we read them. But some are not as easy to understand.
Nida lisa set at posi da rosi to popone ma to popoma dan ne pa kengi na man ne lo pa pa ga da rosi to popo tin singi mana to popo man ne pa ite ne pa ba khu pate be ne ma sana da ite pengi sinema ite a hite si swai te ne ma pe si a yen ne ko.
So in this letter that Kupalu wrote to the church in Thessalonica, this letter was chosen by God to be part of the New Testament.
Nida ma li at ba ma da kupalo sucha da giesi o da na judu fusi o da do Thessalonica do ko ma ite kupalo ra he li to ko na ma jomre no ha si de do da ma li se te li se o ku go.
The people in this church in Thessalonica had run into even more problems.
Nima da kribusi o da Thessalonica kuno ha ona esinge na ma asana da so faso da esi nima atadu ene pe esinge ko.
One of the problems was that there were false teachers and they were teaching wrong things about when Yeshua was going to return.
Ni da esinge na ayen ne ta chuchu mete he ne ma da esi do kuno ko ma ide kia o te pre ni ma esi ostena o te phoe ko ma da esi ite ma hotara receive ko sana hu a hela ho ma da a he seng na da lisa sai show ko da ba ite ba tana ke Yeshua kle sa da he khun tana na ma asan esi na isa re logo.
So in chapter 2, that is later in the letter, he talks about he gives us some information about what happens when Yeshua is ready to come back.
Meno ada ite kupalo araheli namba tabano wa ai show ma jurupusi da ahina or Shakirane, the Shanoba, it is Shukaleda, Hikubo, set another name, I mean, Tate Crate in my show, that they will do.
Now, these believers in Thessalonica were being persecuted by the unbelievers in the city.
Bana Kenama, Durfusi or the Doku Thessalonica, Doku Cinema, as the Kiasida Rosi Tehirma, as Simishe, Nesasana Missearch as Durfusi Pujaga.
And it looks like things have gotten even worse because Kupalu is encouraging them and comforting them even more in this letter.
Nida esingin ho asana ite tapia ta senama asana adu thalabu pojam tema ona da esingin ho kupalu nama ona he sina all sikabino lopli nama san si sheme asana da asi he mohire selu pon klon.
Now, remember, as we read this verse 3, remember that they are being persecuted. They are being hurt and bothered by unbelievers.
Nidama pepa kinama sibetoma ko he de ba ne kida sia sha kanginama de jurfu singine ma san ona si shene me de ma kia sira jurfu ma to he sinama simishe lo simisa jalo.
Tablu, would you read verse 3?
Thessalonians arelata maluta putene. Perya kri puti petene chabeti bi kete bebene. Baby hibwi hitre cho tomaria de tini pu te pocho mete hero tite zute nyana tite moni lu te prena adu tia aku aki peto be hibwi hitre na cho na nurho.
So, what is happening to their faith in God? What is happening to it?
Nimena haba kenama da exilogy ma chomra nginama asana leji at kunama a cabino crate. Mara allergy nama a sholle to ne ite asana ame omeke humloga. A himpo. A grew.
Sammy said.
Oh, I didn't. They said it.
Oh, somebody said. Okay, good. Thank you. So somebody said it's growing, and Kupalu says it is growing a lot.
Anira elsile je chomrango sinma ona duthe la polo chako.
Now it's growing. Notice. We're going to read verse 4. Notice what is going on there, and their faith is growing. Tablu, would you read verse 4?
Ama pulwi puna aku aki penemia se nidu pe he sodomia le pe preze ete plomu de arotihi na tiritikia bi tikia be te metu na te kya te se te hi akine ti kya te plot tu be ro ti uklos homa de ti zu te nya aku aki pe phi chale moni de na chope te plo.
So notice they are being persecuted. They are running into many hardships.
Ani me mera esingi na go he de esingi ma tapia ta sema e supasore sima e ka.
But their faith is growing greatly. How can this be?
Nida esi manada esi na tapia ta se adu bete mada esi na ona allergy chomra lango si ma du na du tenenya masana ami chega dute.
You know, we can learn something about hardships from trees.
Nida pingin ma da tapia ta se si na sana da pisingi che pisingi che ni ne ma sana da pimbi memero da sana te somot moga.
When a storm comes, if a tree stands rigid, stands firmly, it might break.
你的什么都没呢？给那个是读海个海，给那什么都没呢？啊哦，嘛做的呢嘛，现在的不个是读海听呢嘛，什么都没嘛，现在一点来记这个，给那做的呢嘛。
But if that tree bends in the wind, then it will be okay.
那给那什么都没呢？的个是读海呢嘛，哦那啊，一点路做些那的一点个是。Nene masa ada semua gitu mau nama alaki na tuwa una awure ke sebab apa?
I want to tell you what some scientists did several years ago.
Makun masa si show si mada tikusara si nago hai asi nasi meme ta chuchu ami thot themute ne ma asina asi sam meme ko.
They built what is called a biodome. They built it out in the desert. I'll explain what that is.
Mada esingi na ha bet hai asana da hi ma to ka. Asana bet ta chuchu mada ade da khali to pho mada samo si to tha si to mada akra ki ku ti na pho na pho ka.
Now, a desert is a bad place to live in because it's hot, it's dry, there's little water, there's almost no plants.
Ni ba ite khale si ba phosi numa are to mete ni ma sana ona pana nama ki ku ru ba thar ma tha u ko to te mo te phosi numa a dead to ate a ko to me ma sina adu thu che ko to ga.
So they built a large dome. I guess it would look something like this, large enough to put a house inside so you could live in there.
Ni mara esi bed arkoma asana alemi bila ite ki kungi sina ko hai asana bed du alemi bi jana bana bada kuno ha adena da hit go.
And there would be a lot of glass on it to let a lot of light in.
Unara abe abir kuno ma shi ma hura mado ma hu de asana pade pau sin te hino ko me de ma de
Inside they had perfect water, perfect air, everything was perfect inside.
Nila si mi biga thona ha da ku no ma asana mai te ma re lo pli ba asana da kelese sin ma ki ku shona to ba tha sin ma tha u si ko na.
They had vegetables and fruit trees and all kinds of wonderful things.
Ani da ku no ma da asi shot mo te phosi ma do thu che si somo si ma andu the che ga.
And people lived there for months at a time.
Ni to da ki si ora hi gu si ma au bona to pho ma u telin na soli ga.
The scientists wanted to know if something like this could be built and everything be perfect, and if people could live in there a long time and have all the wonderful food that they needed.
Ni ma mi te esi na ha a sena a be mi an kilometer ne ma esi na sisingi ko kina ne da pe esi na ma a be ma da le mi bir ko ne ma batir fote be da pingi ne ma kina pe be ko ne ma da pingi ne ma lo plisi na ma pe lo pli pe lo si na ma ite a dua tu che a o to e funga.
Everything worked perfectly. The vegetables, the people, everything worked perfectly, except for one thing.
Ni da esingi na ma lo plisi ma re lo pli ko he thama tho o ku chono to da ki si te hi na ma ai o re lo pli ko ma na da au te chu ma da are to ko.
They had one problem. They had one thing that would go wrong. Remember, everything inside the dome was perfect. But one thing always went wrong.
Ni da ite pepe to ma ko he da esi abek aku no ma lo pli ma lo pli he mana ite da esin are lo pli bote be asana hu ite petna ite peta se ma u ku go.
The trees would grow up to a certain height and then they would fall over.
Ni semua si esi shot semua si nama sana dua the he ma du the tho ne ma asana da ala khu la ki ke.
They they would grow only so high, and then they'd fall over.
Ni semua si semua nama adu the tu sha ada adu the cepato ni mi ma bi ke khal pelu khale no ko ba adu the to ni ma sana da ona le khu ke.
Now, remember, they got wonderful fertilizer and wonderful water.
Ni mana be to ma ko da semua si te he si ma tha ma ite esi tha ma o to pa da esi ni ma he si ma re lo pli we.
Can anybody guess what went wrong? What the trees didn't have in the biodome? Can anybody guess? That's a tough question.
Ma te ni sa me ko ma me te da esio da hi da kuku no ma lo pli ma lo pli we he mana da me te semua no ma thau o ba he ma he re si ta ba ki ku shon no to me na ma mana da esio ona du the to ne ma le khu ke sa me te.
I don't expect you to guess what it is, but can anybody guess? Anybody wanna?
Sising to mani me ko mana sitin ni sa me ko sising che ga we. She's thinking maybe the root doesn't go all the way down.
That is the problem. That is the problem. The question is, why are the roots not going down? Something's missing inside the biodome.
Mana ato ba mana me te da semua si ma ri no ha te so they're only worried about like the upper part, so on the bottom it will still be kind of like a desert soil.
That's a good guess. The scientists didn't know. They studied it and they finally found out what was missing inside the biodome.
Anima da esti te kusara si no ha ona asisi ngi he me te ma esti semua no ha ale khu kesa me te ne ma ona esti me mek se no ha no shot lo na singi se ko asana da ora aku no ma esti au me kem to ko no mai te alo to ko no mai te ne asingi se ko.
There was no wind inside the biodome.
Da ite ambe aku no ma sana kile se to ko.
There was plenty of air, good air, but there was no wind to blow against the trees.
Nida aku abe aku si nama ulese kuno si nama ulo he mana da klese du si nama u ketuka. Nida abe bilo kya.
When wind blows against a young tree, it makes the roots go deeper and farther.
Nida semua da ide tu da thepa bana he ba bana kene ma alo ma da klise komite ma da klise he uda SEO bana pho ne ma da semua na ma sana da asu ta ari sana alo ta ya. Yes. Lu pishi alu tak no ya le.
Without any wind to bother the tree didn't think it needed any roots to go deep.
Ni me te da semua se oda aku no ha ona atenina da klese oblu to ne he me na atenina da esingi na ma alu shuja pishi ya na da arito atenina.
Now, these believers in Thessalonica, they were in a storm. A windy storm all the time, hardships and persecution by unbelievers.
Mena da jurfus de oda da Thessalonica kuno ha da esingi na ma shushi ja huda klese du the jo me ma oda esingi na ma so paso resi ma o to pa da KSC asilo mishe si message ma o si ona du the pu.
And because of that, their faith grew stronger.
Ani me te da esingin ha hena atapia te se au no ha da esingin ma ale ite ji na chama ngo sino ha sana da so ri sine he ona apishi adudu te pupu.
Just as a tree grows their roots into the earth, these believers were growing their faith in God.
Ani sana da semua sino ha ona esi asim ite asim de tapa mi tapa lo ari si no asana da ona asim me du te po angin he beautiful cinema ade leji na ma de tomre amui ku na ma asana asi ite ji cho po ba.
When we are going through hardships or maybe even persecution, it's not pleasant. It hurts.
Ni da pengen si na ma kira na pe khabe no da ite tapya da se si kunwa na ke si na amni she pe ne ma ite amu pengen no ka me ma una she go.
But it does produce a stronger faith if we respond properly to God.
Na da tapya da se si na ma kina pe khabe no asana amu pengi to bote be go ha kina ne ona pe met pe khabe no ma pe ona pe me reg se pengi hu da pe ji shop go se da chum rangi si ne ma ite a reg se be ko.
If we are in a hardship and we get upset with God, mad at God, that is it's like a tree that is fighting against the wind and might break us, might break our faith.
Ni kira ne ona pe ide sana si pladuna chomre si ne ma asana da somo to mo sino ko he kira ne klisi du he ne ma asana da somo ngi na ma ayula ma da ite demite ite klisi na dunia na asana ala ki chege.
But if we read our Bibles and remember what God has said,
na kira ne ona pe si me sho pu da pe le ji chomre ngo si ne ma pe ona kira ne pe palisa se si to ba da pe ji pe ona sana da me ka se da chomre ngo si no ko.
If we say God has allowed this to happen to me and he will take care of me.
Una kina pe kabina tapya ta se si ne ma una kina pe he ko hana ko ma pe kabina me te ne ma chumre no ha ite asu happy vengi.
Then just like these believers, our faith will grow stronger.
Ba una pe hina te da ma tapya ta se ko ma chumre asu he to ba chumre mi chok se pe te ne hu bana ne ma pe ma se ka na da de jurpu si da Thessalonica ku no ba ko.
If there are no storms in our life, our faith cannot grow stronger.
Nimda mina da pengi si na masana klase du to mana tapya ta se si au e tu ne masana da pengi si pelu ji chum rango si ma adu atu chepeto.
So we should be thinking, God allowed this to happen so that my faith in him can become stronger.
Mena da pengi ne ma pe betni hu bla hena o ma ite chumre no ha asu happy weather ite tapya ta se ko mite he ne ma asana da asime no ji shok se venada elango.
Anything to add to that before we move on?
Numara sisi he show plopu ba te chiche na sai show iswa ko se da ngito. Okay.
Okay, I think we have time to tackle one more thing. I mean, we've got quite a bit of time. There's a verse here, verse 5. Verse 5, it's not easy to understand what it's saying.
Nima auda lisa se obot madua man ha ite da amma phun banga no ko a heba to phun ma a hete nima da pelo singi no ha a yet ki ko.
So this is not going to be easy, but Tableau, would you read just the first half of verse 5? Not the whole verse, just the first half.
Lo te hi kia atena samara jiria tena ma ato atebre.
We don't know how where half is.
That's part of the problem. How to divide it up.
The Glamitwa. I think she's finished half. Ni palo lo he ne ma ne singi pito tua he na. And funny man, there's a comma, so she's gonna read it until the comma.
Okay. Let's try that.
She already did.
Oh, sure did. Okay.
Yes.
See if this sounds like the first half. If I put it in English. It is proof of God's correct judgment. Does that sound like what it sounds like in Spanish?
Ne papo me da ite arot klo.
Phun aku ki samara ku dia kodaki ho.
Do da khu da khu.
Mare.
Da khu.
Da khu le.
Da khu to klam. It's just the first half, right?
Tha cho ne.
Da ne banga to do ba phu ba ko.
Da. Lo ti ki kia atena samara jiria tinama ajo atibre phun aku aki.
Yeah, it says something about how his punishment is correct and right and just.
Okay. So that's what it says, but to understand what it means, that's a little difficult.
Ni da ahe mara pipa no hwa ide pipa ngi na ma sana yu be ne ma na da asilo ni ne ma asilo isop be te ne ma aye ka se ko.
Now, the verse before that talks about the persecution and the hardships they are going through.
Ni da ba bikya ma pti man ba le no ko ha ai chope da ma juru phusi asin ma khabino krete da psc si me sa se singi no ko.
But strangely, their faith is growing. It's not broken, it's growing. Their faith.
Da asi juru phusi le ji jum rango sinema ite asana pya ka to ko mite ma sa asingi na ma ona adu the la pu ko.
The world looks at these Thessalonians, and they think, how can this be? This is a strange thing. We are trying to hurt them, but they have even more faith in God now than before.
Ninda kia sida ro singi na ma me da juru phusi na ma da asingi na ma pa cha si mite he ma hina ona pe si machine ne asi da pe minna michel lo pli ba asi ba ma da ona pe me ke na ha asi na ha che ji sho pu se da chum re si.
Kupalu says, this remarkable thing is proof that God is at work in their hearts.
Ni ba to phona wa jur ku palu no ga ahina ma ite da si method ku na ma da ite si method kunne na ma da chum re amit me da jur pu si asi sploku.
Because they are following God, God is giving them a wonderful strength that is amazing.
Mimite ma jur pu si no ha aji sho pu se chum re ngo si no ha da chum re ma ite da asingi no ha ona mi re se da mi sho pu da asi sploku ko.
And it tells the persecutors that if God is blessing them, then you better watch out because God will judge you.
Ni ba ma bana kin ma a he sina da ai show ma da u premise si te hina ko ahina me no ha da si me tha a ke si no ha si be mere me te he ne ma da ite chom re ma e hu de bless sorry ma jur pu si no ha si me re si singe me te ma da si premise si te hina ma chom re a chiria si di pa.
If God is blessing them, then God must be angry with me and will one day judge me, punish me.
Me no ha da pe ve method ma da ki si at quest no ha chum re na ma ite atari tari shopu si ne ma da vengi ne ma chum re ma si plot du ne ne ve ki me no ha sana da tan ki ma chum re a me log se te su si to ba ite chiria ve paki.
This happens many times when believers are being persecuted and are being hurt by the world.
你的嘛就是普信你的阿卡贝的的说法说的是的，老皮胡克老师的嘛，阿说开始嘛，我一路个，
God gives them that special strength.
那的中人的嘛，阿德鲁的是有创意个噻，来自创意个噻。
Before Kupalu and Silas, before they came to Thessalonica the first time, they were in Philippi, a city called Philippi.
的库巴鲁呢的阿库不接库 Silas 呢话不，是 John 那个噻的，阿 John 那的Thessalonica，的开头呢嘿不开的嘛，I see 的嘛，阿抓乌热的到米那 Philippi 库个。
And maybe you remember the story.
Mana da singi nama da awda da Philippi ku nama de Kupalu nama mikrai te nama si tuma meki.
Kupalu and Silas were persecuted. They were beaten and they were thrown into jail.
Ni da awda de Philippi ku nama ite Kupalu na ku Silas nama asi kiasi deno da asi da thau ko na min na machine singi.
At midnight, they began singing songs of praise to God. They began praising God.
Nada te mo ki ya ki no ha ku palu na ku Silas no ha o kui ona de iroda ina litu tet tia chomre mui.
God stepped in and did something wonderful there.
Ni ba asi ona ete iro no ha chomre no ha hammi te chichu da ren ne.
There was an earthquake and their chains came off.
Ni ba mo ki ya ki no ha da ite sana chumre ami kya ke hi mi kya ke ma da ite ami ku yo lo pli ami hun klon ba ba ite ku pa lo ngi si da si alu pum mak lo ma da esi ku si no ha a la ki ke lo a pya ke lo a mu ke lo.
The man in charge of the jail, he saw what God was doing. And he fell on his knees and he said he wanted to know about Yeshua. He wanted to become a follower of Yeshua.
Ba ke na ha ba apre be metalopli da thoku si ne he ma asana da asala du ler pe no ha mether no da chomre mi te mi ne ba na ke no ha a hina asana adangu no ba hina o ishu ka me be si chomre re kya.
When the believer Stephen was being stoned to death, persecuted, and now they were killing him with stones.
What was his name?
Stephen.
Amaku Steven ko ha ma da engi na ma khabino te he ma KSC asi min na mission ne lu to ba sana avi lu na da ame visa lu na da lo si ga.
While he was being stoned, his face let me see. Let me read what it. Let me look at what it says here. This is in Acts chapter 7.
Acts ma
You
predunya po.
can turn to it if you'd like. Let's see. Acts chapter 7, verse 55. It says he was completely filled. He was filled, controlled by the Holy Spirit.
Ma ba phon ma hena da ite kusti vengi na ma da esi kiesi ma vilona lobote ma da engi na ma da asana abise na ma do me sena da engi na ma shushu da when de spirit Holy Spirit tesa se awlo lopli da ku da e ku go.
And God did something wonderful.
No ba na kin ha chomre ami thothe da te chu.
Stephen looked up and he said, I see the heavens open and I see Yeshua standing at the right hand of the Father.
Ni ba phon ma ku Steven ha ahina ba ameme the da mo ku ne ahina o kun ne ma ba me the da te da mo ku ma ami mo pe da ha tu pa me the da Yeshua ma o da chomre tu ku ta twar kya.
Many of those people that were trying to kill him, many of these people got even more angry with Stephen.
ni ba Steven he ar kono ha KSC da aviluna loss ti he ma sana siplot bu thalo po ja ka
At least one of them, though, became a believer.
mana da are ne ma da SC da ale vina loss ti he no ha o te prima da ki te prima thwa ke te krifu ka
After that, this man became a believer, and that was Kupalu.
ni ba ma apreji chom rek se lango ko se ma aprevina lot te he te prima da ma ku palu ka
When we are in hardship and being persecuted, if we trust God, God will give us the strength and the encouragement that we need at that time.
ni da pengina ha pe khabe no da ite so pa so re si wa da ona ke si me shepe ne ma bana khena ma chum re ma da pe hu da ite da pengina ma pilu si she to sana pe shok pe shok se da pe ni si pisi plus sin ko sana piji ke se piji chop lo chum re ngo
We're going to end right here. I just wanted to say that when hardships come, that is an opportunity for us to really show the world what God can do.
inda pengina ma da ba pe khabe no te so pa so te che ba khene ma sana da ite pengina ma te dum me che lo ka ke si da ma ite pe chom re na ma adu athu ba te na ko pe dum me che ke si ba
Have you ever had an experience like that? Where God gave you that special strength and you responded in a wonderful way and it even surprised you.
ni da singina ma si khabe no ka na da singina ha ite ayen yaw ti che he da pe so to pre ku ni na to ba ba na khina ha chom re adata si da singina ha sana da si me relopli ka se sana si shok se na ba sana da si me thor ko no ha da singina ma ite over mi che hu asana si kya ka se